May 3rd, 2007. A seaside town in Portugal. A quiet holiday apartment. And a little girl, just days away from turning 4 years old, gone without a trace. Her name was Madeleine McCann, and her disappearance would spark one of the most infamous manhunts in history. 16 years later, her face is still etched into the public memory. But despite hundreds of suspects, countless theories, and even a declared prime suspect, the question remains the same. Where is Madeleine McCann? The McCann family arrived at the Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz on April 28, 2007. On the surface, it was everything a family holiday should be. Whitewashed villas lined the streets, swimming pools glistened under the Portuguese sun, and the ocean's rhythmic crash filled the air. Kate and Jerry McCann, both doctors from Leicestershire in England, had chosen this location. For one reason, it was marketed as a family-friendly resort, the kind of place where parents could relax and children could safely play. They weren't alone. The McCanns were part of a larger group of friends, doctors and professionals who had all traveled with their families. Together, they became known as the Tapas 7, a name that would soon be repeated endlessly in headlines around the world. Madeleine Beth McCann was a spirited, lively little girl. Blonde hair, bright smile, and a tiny birthmark in her eye, a coloboma, a rare condition that made her right eye instantly recognizable. It would become a symbol plastered on posters, news broadcasts, and digital billboards across the globe. To her parents, she was simply Maddie, 3 years old, full of energy, curious about the world, and counting down to her 4th birthday just days away. She was the kind of child who filled every room with life. Her younger siblings, twins Sean and Amelie, were only 2 years old. They looked up to Maddie, followed her, and sometimes fought with her the way siblings do. For the McCanns, this holiday was about rest, sun, and memories. But in just a few days, those memories would turn into something far darker. The photograph would come to symbolize the case. Madeleine sitting on the edge of the pool, wearing a pink sun hat, smiling in the sunlight. Her father beside her, smiling too. It was snapped on May 3rd, 2007. The day everything would change. No one knew then that it would become the last known picture of Madeleine alive. Each evening, the group of friends, the McCanns and the Tapas 7, would meet for dinner at the resort's Tapas restaurant. It wasn't far from their apartments, roughly 55 meters away. They felt comfortable leaving their children asleep inside, checking on them every 20 to 30 minutes in a kind of informal rotation. The Ocean Club didn't provide babysitters, and the McCanns believed their system was enough. On May 3rd, they followed the same pattern. Madeleine and the twins were tucked into bed at around 7 p.m. Kate read them a story, kissed them goodnight, and quietly left the apartment. At 8:30 p.m., the adults gathered at the Tapas restaurant. They ordered food, poured wine, and began their evening. They believed everything was fine. Around 9 p.m., Jerry McCann left the table and walked back to apartment 5A. The night was quiet, the resort dimly lit. When he opened the apartment door, he saw his children sleeping peacefully. Madeleine was still there, lying on the bed, clutching her toy. Satisfied, he returned to dinner. Along the way, he ran into another guest, a man named Jeremy Wilkins. They chatted for a few minutes before Jerry went back to the restaurant. By 9:30, another check was made. This time, a friend named Matthew Oldfield offered to look in on the McCann children. He later admitted he didn't step fully inside. He only listened from the doorway. Hearing no noise, he assumed all was well. But by 10 p.m., everything had changed. Kate McCann rose from the table and walked the short distance back to apartment 5A. She entered the apartment quietly, expecting to find her children asleep. Instead, she froze. The bedroom window was open. The shutters were raised. The curtains flapped in the night air. And Madeleine's bed was empty. Kate's heart pounded. She rushed through the apartment, checking every corner, every closet. No, Madeleine. Panic surged. She ran back to the restaurant, her voice breaking as she screamed, "They've taken her!" The night that followed was chaos. The alarm spread quickly. Resort staff, guests, and locals poured into the streets, shouting Madeleine's name, combing the beach, the alleys, the dark roads, leading out of town. Police were called, but crucial mistakes were already being made. The apartment was not sealed. People walked in and out, contaminating potential evidence. Neighbors, friends, staff, and eventually police officers trampled through the rooms. By dawn, any forensic evidence inside apartment 5A was compromised. Praia da Luz, once a sleepy holiday town, transformed overnight into the epicenter of the world's media. Within 24 hours, Madeleine's face was everywhere. Flyers were printed, posters plastered, news crews arrived in droves. But the investigation, led by Portuguese police, the Polícia Judiciária, was already off to a disastrous start. The first suspect emerged almost immediately, a local man named Murat. He lived nearby, spoke English, and quickly became involved in the search, even offering to translate for police. But his eagerness drew suspicion. He was soon named an arguido, an official suspect. Murat denied any involvement, and years later he was officially cleared. But the suspicion around him cast a long shadow, and as the investigation stumbled, eyes began to turn toward the McCanns themselves. By September 2007, 4 months after Madeleine's disappearance, Kate and Jerry McCann were formally declared arguidos. Police believed inconsistencies in their statements, combined with cadaver dog alerts in their apartment, suggested possible involvement. The theory that Madeleine had died in an accident and the McCanns had covered it up. But the evidence was thin, circumstantial, and widely disputed by independent experts. Eventually, the McCanns were cleared, but the damage was done. For years, they carried the weight of suspicion, even as they campaigned relentlessly to find their daughter. The days following Madeleine's disappearance felt like a storm without direction. Reporters camped outside the Ocean Club. Every angle of the McCanns' lives was dissected. Strangers debated their parenting decisions. But behind the noise, the investigation faltered. Key witnesses weren't properly interviewed. Potential suspects slipped away. The crime scene, already compromised, yielded little forensic evidence. A single hair, some partial fingerprints, nothing definitive. For many, it felt as though the case had been lost in the very first hours. But the public didn't forget. Almost immediately, celebrities, politicians, and even the Pope expressed support. The McCanns met with Pope Benedict XVI in Rome, holding up a photograph of Madeleine that soon spread across the globe. High-profile donations poured in. A Find Madeleine fund was created, raising millions. Private investigators were hired. Billboards went up across Europe. Madeleine's face appeared on TV in every country imaginable. The disappearance of one child had become a worldwide cause. With the exposure came reports. Dozens, then hundreds, of alleged sightings of Madeleine. She was seen in Spain, in Morocco, in Malta. Each claim sparked hope, then disappointment. One of the most controversial sightings came from Jane Tanner, a member of the Tapas 7. On the night of May 3rd, around 9:15 p.m., she claimed she saw a man carrying a child near the McCann apartment. She described him as thin, dark-haired, and wearing light-colored pants. The child appeared to be in pajamas, barefoot. This became known as the Tanner sighting, and for years it shaped the investigation. But later, police would admit the man was likely an innocent tourist carrying his own child home from a creche. Every lead seemed to collapse under scrutiny. As months turned into years, the media circus surrounding the case became relentless. British tabloids splashed sensational headlines. Secret tunnels, mysterious strangers, government conspiracies. The McCanns sued several newspapers for defamation and won, but the coverage left scars, fueling suspicion against the family while muddying the waters of the actual investigation. The world was watching, but clarity was nowhere to be found. Years later, new suspects emerged. One of the most infamous was Christian Brückner, a German drifter and convicted sex offender who had lived in the Algarve at the time of Madeleine's disappearance. In 2020, German authorities declared him the prime suspect. They claimed they had evidence, suggesting Madeleine was dead, though they never revealed what it was. Brückner denied involvement from his prison cell, where he was serving time for unrelated crimes. To this day, no charges have been filed against him in connection with Madeleine. For Kate and Jerry McCann, the years since 2007 have been defined by two realities: suspicion and hope. They became symbols of resilience, never letting the search for their daughter fade. They appeared in interviews, documentaries, even addressed parliaments to advocate for missing children. But behind the public image was grief. Kate later described sleepless nights, endless second guessing, and the agony of not knowing. For the twins, Sean and Amelie, growing up under the shadow of their sister's disappearance became part of their identity. Every birthday, every anniversary, every year passing without answers. Over the years, theories have piled up. Abduction by a stranger, perhaps a burglar who panicked, perhaps a predator who had been watching, an organized trafficking ring. Some believe Madeleine was taken for illegal adoption or exploitation, an accidental death. The theory that Madeleine died in the apartment and it was covered up, wandered away. Though unlikely, some suggest she woke, left the apartment, and met misfortune nearby. Each theory has defenders, each theory has holes, and none has ever been proven. It's been more than 16 years since that night in Praia da Luz. Madeleine McCann would be 20 years old today. Her face, digitally aged, continues to appear on posters, shared online, and printed in newspapers whenever a new lead emerges. But the truth remains buried. A little girl disappeared. A family was shattered. A case that should have been solved in its first hours instead became one of the greatest mysteries of modern times. And the same question Kate and Jerry McCann ask themselves every single morning, still echoes: where is Madeleine McCann?